The unexpected visitor. Jason Carter never thought his quiet life would turn into the start of something extraordinary. Living in a small town on the edge of nowhere, his days were simple. A 9-to-5 office job, a rundown truck, and a modest home were all he needed, or so he thought. That all changed one quiet evening. Jason had just stepped outside to water his garden. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. It was peaceful, the kind of moment where you could forget the world's troubles. But then, a loud, otherworldly sound shattered the calm. A streak of light zipped across the sky, moving too fast to be a plane. Jason froze, his hose spraying water onto his boots. The light grew brighter and brighter until it came crashing down in the forest behind his house. The ground shook like an earthquake, and a faint glow flickered from the trees. What the hell was that? Jason muttered, his heart pounding. Grabbing a flashlight, he jogged toward the forest, his curiosity overpowering his fear. The air smelled strange, like burnt metal, as he approached the crash site. Trees were scorched, and the ground was littered with debris. At the center of it all was a strange object, a sleek, metallic probe shaped like a perfect sphere. It pulsed faintly with blue light. Jason hesitated, his flashlight trembling in his hand. Is this an alien thing? The sphere hummed softly, as if answering him. Before Jason could react, it cracked open. A holographic figure emerged, a tall, regal-looking alien dressed in flowing robes. The alien spoke, its voice deep and commanding, but Jason couldn't understand a word. Strange symbols hovered in the air around the projection. "Ah, I don't speak alien," Jason said, taking a cautious step back. The hologram shifted, the symbols rearranging themselves. Then, in perfect English, it spoke again. "Jason Carter, descendant of the Zendari lineage. You have been found." Jason blinked. "What? Zendari what now? I think you've got the wrong guy." The hologram ignored him. "The galaxy is in peril. The throne must be claimed. You are the key." Before Jason could respond, the sphere snapped shut and released a small cube. The object hovered for a moment before landing gently in Jason's hands. It was warm, almost alive, and engraved with the same alien symbols. Suddenly, the probe emitted a sharp beeping noise. Jason's instincts screamed at him to run. He barely made it behind a tree before the probe exploded, leaving a smoking crater where it had been. The cube, however, remained intact in his hands. Jason stared at it, his mind racing. What have I gotten myself into? As he stumbled back toward his house, strange things began to happen. His phone wouldn't work, his car wouldn't start, and the air seemed unnaturally still. Then, as he reached his front door, he noticed something, or someone, watching him. A figure stood in the shadows, tall and cloaked, with glowing eyes that pierced the darkness. Jason froze, clutching the cube tightly. "Who's there?" The figure stepped closer, revealing an alien face, sharp features, gray skin, and a stern expression. "Give me the cube," it said in a voice that was both mechanical and menacing. Jason backed away. "I don't even know what this thing is." "Stay back." The alien didn't wait. It lunged toward him with inhuman speed. Jason barely dodged, his survival instincts kicking in. He grabbed a nearby shovel and swung it with all his might, but the alien was too fast. It grabbed the shovel mid-swing and tossed it aside like a twig. Before Jason could react, the cube in his hands began to glow. A wave of energy erupted from it, throwing the alien backward. Jason stared at the cube, then at the stunned alien, who was now scrambling to its feet. "Jason Carter," a calm, robotic voice echoed from the cube. "You are the chosen heir. Your protection is guaranteed." Jason didn't have time to process what was happening. The alien hissed, its eyes narrowing. "This isn't over," it growled before vanishing into thin air. Jason stood there, shaking, as the cube dimmed and returned to its dormant state. His quiet life was over, and he knew it. Whatever the cube was, it had painted a target on his back. As he stepped into his house, locking the door behind him, Jason couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning. Somewhere out there, a whole galaxy seemed to be waiting for him, whether he wanted it or not. And Jason Carter, the ordinary man, had no idea how extraordinary his life was about to become. The Galactic Invitation. Jason Carter sat at his kitchen table, staring at the alien cube. He'd barely slept since the encounter with the strange intruder, and his thoughts were a chaotic mix of fear and disbelief. The cube had remained dormant since it blasted the alien attacker, but it radiated an unsettling warmth, as though it were alive. The silence was shattered by a low hum that grew louder by the second. Jason looked outside his window and froze. The stars seemed to ripple, and a massive shadow loomed over his backyard. It wasn't just a spaceship. It was a floating fortress, sleek and metallic, blotting out the sky. A beam of light shot down, enveloping Jason before he could react. The world dissolved in a flash. When Jason opened his eyes, he was no longer in his kitchen. The air was thick and metallic, and the walls around him shimmered like liquid silver. He was standing in a vast chamber, surrounded by alien figures dressed in ornate armor. Their faces were angular and regal, their eyes glowing with intelligence and authority. At the center stood a tall alien woman, her presence commanding and her robes flowing like liquid starlight. "Jason Carter," she said, her voice calm but piercing, "welcome to the flagship of the Destined Empire." Jason blinked. "Wait. What? Where am I? How do you know my name?" "You are aboard the Australis, the heart of our fleet," the woman said. "I am HFY, High Envoy of the Destined Empire. And you, Jason Carter, are the last of the royal bloodline, the rightful heir to the galactic throne." Jason laughed nervously. "Okay, you've definitely got the wrong guy. I'm just a regular guy from Earth. No royalty here." HFY's expression didn't change. "Your disbelief is expected, but the cube does not lie. It has chosen you as the inheritor of the Xendari legacy." Jason looked down at the cube, still in his hand, and shook his head. "There's no way. I don't even know what this thing is." HFY gestured, and a hologram appeared around them. It showed a galaxy teeming with life. Vast star systems, bustling space stations, and fleets of ships. The Xendari Empire once ruled this galaxy with wisdom and strength. But our throne has been empty for centuries, ever since the royal bloodline vanished. Without a leader, chaos has spread. Rival factions like the Venler Federation grow stronger every day. If you do not claim the throne, the galaxy will fall into darkness. Jason frowned. "Why me? I'm not a leader. I'm barely keeping my life together as it is." HFY's eyes softened, just slightly. "Leadership is not always about strength or strategy. It is about resilience, and you have been chosen because you possess the qualities our empire needs. The cube bonded to you for a reason." Jason opened his mouth to argue, but the chamber suddenly shook. Alarm sirens blared, and the walls glowed red. HFY's calm demeanor vanished as she barked orders in a language Jason couldn't understand. "What's happening?" he asked, gripping the cube tightly. "We're under attack," HFY said, her tone sharp. "The Venler Federation has tracked you here." As if on cue, the walls around them turned transparent, revealing a breathtaking but terrifying sight. Dozens of massive Venler warships surrounded the Australis, their weapons glowing ominously. The Xendari crew scrambled, activating shields and powering up their own weapons, but the odds were clearly against them. HFY turned to Jason. "The cube's power can protect us, but only if you activate it." Jason stepped back. "Activate it? I don't even know how to use this thing." "There's no time to hesitate," HFY shouted. "The cube responds to your will. Focus on protecting this ship, or we are all doomed." Jason stared at the cube, his heart pounding. He didn't understand any of this, why he was chosen, what the cube could do, or why the galaxy seemed to be falling apart. But as the Venler ships fired their first shots, he had no choice. Taking a deep breath, Jason closed his eyes and held the cube tightly. He concentrated, imagining a shield around the ship, something strong enough to hold off the attack. The cube began to glow, brighter and brighter, until it was blinding. A pulse of energy erupted from the cube, spreading through the ship and beyond. Jason opened his eyes to see a shimmering barrier enveloping the Australis, deflecting the Venler's attacks. The incendiary crew cheered, but Jason felt his knees buckle as the cube dimmed in his hands. "You did it," Ishara said, helping him stay upright. "You've taken the first step toward your destiny." Jason didn't feel like a hero. He felt like a man completely out of his depth. But as the ship prepared to jump to safety, he realized there was no going back. The galaxy had chosen him, whether he liked it or not. A dangerous escape. The sound of alarms and explosions echoed in Jason's ears as the Australis jolted violently. The Venler Federation's attack was relentless, their warships firing on the incendiary vessel with precision and fury. Jason stumbled through the chaos, clutching the alien cube like a lifeline. "This way," Ishara shouted, pulling him down a corridor that seemed to stretch and twist with every step. The sleek metallic walls flickered as the ship's systems struggled to hold under the assault. "What's the plan here?" Jason yelled, his voice barely audible over the sirens. "Because it feels like we're about to get vaporized." "We're making an emergency jump," Ishara said, her tone steady despite the panic around them. "But the ship's systems are compromised. We'll need to use the cube to stabilize the portal." Jason's stomach churned. "Of course we do. Because nothing about this day can be easy." They reached the ship's core, a massive, pulsating chamber alive with energy. The walls shimmered like liquid light, and in the center stood a towering device, a gateway generator, surrounded by incendiary engineers frantically inputting commands. Sparks flew as a console exploded, and the generator emitted an ominous hum. Ishara turned to Jason. "Place the cube into the central conduit. It will amplify the jump drive and take us to safety." Jason hesitated, staring at the device. What if it doesn't work? Or worse, what if it does something crazy, like tear us in half? Ishara's piercing gaze locked onto his. "You wanted to know why you were chosen. This is why. The cube only responds to you. Now, act before it's too late." The ship shook violently as another blast hit. Jason swallowed hard and stepped forward. The cube in his hands seemed to grow warmer, as if sensing his hesitation. He placed it into the conduit, and immediately, the generator roared to life. Streams of energy swirled around the cube, creating a vortex of light that began to tear open a portal in the fabric of space. "Hold on to something," Ishara yelled. The ship lurched forward, and the light consumed everything. When Jason opened his eyes, the world was different. The Australis had crash-landed on an alien planet, its once pristine hull now scorched and battered. Outside, the air was thick with an eerie green mist, and the landscape was unlike anything Jason had ever seen. Jagged mountains loomed in the distance, and the ground was covered in glowing bioluminescent vegetation that pulsed like a heartbeat. "What happened?" Jason muttered, pulling himself to his feet. Ishara appeared beside him, her expression grim. "The jump was unstable. We've landed on an uncharted world." Jason stepped outside the ship, the cube now cool in his pocket. The air smelled strange, a mix of ozone and something earthy. "Okay, great. Uncharted world. Does that mean it's safe, or are we about to get eaten by alien monsters?" Ishara didn't answer, which wasn't reassuring. The crew began surveying the area, setting up defenses around the wreckage. Jason wandered a bit farther, drawn by a faint glow in the distance. He pushed through the dense vegetation and found himself standing before an ancient ruin. Massive stone structures carved with alien symbols that glowed faintly, much like the cube. "This place. It feels familiar," Jason whispered, though he couldn't explain why. As he approached, the cube in his pocket began to hum. The ruins responded, their lights growing brighter. Jason placed a hand on one of the stones, and suddenly, the ground beneath him shifted. A hidden door slid open, revealing a dark stairway leading underground. Jason hesitated, but the cube's hum grew louder, almost insistent. He turned back to call for Ishara, but something made him stop. For the first time, he felt like this was something he needed to do alone. Taking a deep breath, Jason descended into the darkness. The air grew colder, and the walls were etched with symbols that seemed to tell a story, one of war, betrayal, and the rise of a great empire. At the bottom of the stairs, he entered a vast chamber illuminated by floating orbs of light. In the center stood a pedestal, and atop it was a device unlike anything Jason had seen before, a sleek, metallic gauntlet engraved with Zendari symbols. As Jason approached, the gauntlet began to glow. The cube in his pocket leaped out, merging with the gauntlet in a burst of energy. Jason shielded his eyes as the room filled with light. When it dimmed, the gauntlet was now on his arm, pulsing with power. "Jason Carter," a deep mechanical voice echoed in the chamber. "You have awakened the Sentinel's gauntlet. You are now the protector of the Zendari legacy." Jason stared at the gauntlet, feeling its weight and power. He had no idea what he was supposed to do with it. But one thing was clear: this wasn't just a random journey anymore. It was destiny. Behind him, the sound of growls echoed in the stairway. Jason turned, his heart racing as shadows moved in the darkness. Whatever was down here wasn't friendly. Jason clenched his fist, the gauntlet responding with a surge of energy. "All right," he muttered. "Let's see what this thing can do." Allies and enemies. Jason Carter woke to the sound of unfamiliar voices echoing through the jungle-like terrain of the uncharted planet. The wreckage of the Astralis loomed behind him, but he wasn't alone anymore. Surrounding him were a mix of alien beings, some Zendari, others entirely new species, armed to the teeth and speaking in hushed tones. He sat up groggily, his hand brushing against the gauntlet now fused to his arm. Its energy pulsed faintly, reminding him that his life had become anything but normal. "Good, you're awake," said a gruff voice. Jason turned to see a hulking alien with leathery green skin and piercing yellow eyes. The creature extended a clawed hand. "Name's Kaluk, captain of the Zendari Royal Guard. We've been searching for survivors since the crash." Jason hesitated before shaking the alien's hand. "Jason Carter. And I guess I'm your new heir, or something like that." Kaluk's expression remained neutral. "So it seems, though many in the guard still find it difficult to believe." Jason glanced around at the group. Their faces ranged from skeptical to outright hostile. It was clear not everyone was thrilled about him inheriting the Zendari throne. "What's the plan?" Jason asked, trying to mask his unease. Kaluk pointed toward the horizon. "The Venler are still hunting us. We intercepted one of their scout drones nearby. They know we're here, and it's only a matter of time before they send reinforcements. But this planet isn't just a random stop. It holds secrets tied to the Zendari legacy, secrets that could turn the tide of this war." Jason's curiosity piqued. What kind of secrets? Kaluk's gaze shifted to the gauntlet on Jason's arm. "That device. It's the key to unlocking an ancient weapon hidden here, a weapon powerful enough to rival the Venler fleet. But you're not the only one interested in finding it." Jason frowned. "Let me guess. Someone here isn't playing for the home team." Kaluk's silence was answer enough. The group moved cautiously through the jungle, their every step watched by glowing eyes hidden in the dense foliage. Jason couldn't shake the feeling that he was being followed. The gauntlet occasionally flickered, as though responding to an unseen threat. "Stay close," Kaluk said, his weapon drawn. "This planet is alive in ways you can't imagine." Alive was an understatement. The trees seemed to move when you weren't looking, and the ground occasionally pulsed like a heartbeat. Jason felt like the planet itself was testing them, whispering secrets just out of reach. As they approached a towering cliffside, Ishara, who had been scouting ahead, returned with urgency in her steps. "We found the entrance to the weapons vault, but we're not alone." Jason's stomach sank. "Venlar." Ishara shook her head. "Worse. Mercenaries. They're scavengers working for whoever pays the most. And they're already inside." The group hurried to the vault, a massive stone door etched with the same glowing symbols Jason had seen in the ruins. The gauntlet reacted immediately, its energy forming a pattern that matched the door's carvings. "Looks like it wants me to open it," Jason said, stepping forward. Kalok grabbed his arm. "Not yet. If the mercenaries are inside, they've likely set traps. We'll need to clear the way first." Jason nodded, stepping back as the guards moved in formation. They entered cautiously, weapons raised. Inside, the vault was a maze of tunnels, each one more treacherous than the last. Strange glowing crystals lined the walls, casting eerie shadows. As they moved deeper, Jason noticed one of the guards, a Xendari with sharp features and a sly demeanor, hanging back, whispering into a small device. The gauntlet pulsed in warning. Jason leaned toward Kalok. "We've got a problem. That guy's working for someone else." Kalok's eyes narrowed. "Are you certain?" Jason raised his arm, letting the gauntlet's energy flicker as proof. "It's not just a hunch." Kalok gave a curt nod. "Stay close. We'll deal with him soon." The group reached the central chamber of the vault, a cavernous room with a massive platform at its center. Hovering above it was an orb of pure energy, pulsating with raw power. Jason could feel its pull, the gauntlet reacting like a magnet drawn to its counterpart. "That's it," Ishara said. "The weapon's core." Before they could move closer, a voice echoed through the chamber. "Not so fast." From the shadows emerged a group of mercenaries, their leader a tall, scared alien with a mechanical arm. He smirked, aiming a weapon at Jason. "Looks like we hit the jackpot. The hair and the weapon. Today's a good day." Jason raised his hands instinctively. "Let me guess. You're not here to make friends." The mercenary chuckled. "No, but we'll make a fortune selling you to the Venlar." Before anyone could react, the Xendari trader stepped forward, aiming his weapon at Kalok. "Drop your weapons, or this ends badly for all of you." Jason's heart raced. The tension in the room was palpable, and for a moment, it felt like all was lost. But the gauntlet had other plans. It surged with energy, sending a shockwave that knocked the trader's weapon from his hands. Jason seized the moment, diving toward the platform and placing his hand on the orb. The room erupted in light as the weapon activated, sending beams of energy that scattered the mercenaries. The leader snarled, retreating with his remaining forces. "This isn't over, Earthling." As the light dimmed, Jason turned to the group, the gauntlet still glowing. "Looks like we've got the weapon. Now what?" Kalok stepped forward, placing a hand on Jason's shoulder. "Now we fight back." Jason nodded, feeling a mix of fear and determination. He didn't ask for this, but the galaxy wasn't going to save itself. The hidden empire. The Xendari homeworld wasn't what Jason Carter expected. After their journey through hostile space, they emerged from hyperspace to find the planet cloaked in a shimmering field of light, making it invisible to anyone who didn't know exactly where to look. The Astralis, now patched together from its earlier crash, drifted into orbit. Jason stared out of the ship's viewport, his breath catching at the sight. The planet was massive, far larger than Earth, its surface dotted with glowing cities that pulsed like stars. But something felt off. Despite its grandeur, the world seemed eerily still. No bustling ships darted between cities. No signs of life greeted them from orbit. "It's beautiful," Jason muttered, "but where is everyone?" Ishara stood beside him, her face grim. The Xendari rulers sealed the planet behind a quantum barrier centuries ago. They placed themselves in cryostasis to survive the war that wiped out most of our empire. They've been waiting for the hair to awaken them. Jason frowned. And that's me, right? Because a magic cube says so. Ishara ignored his sarcasm. This is no ordinary inheritance. The throne is bound to the gauntlet you now wear. Without your presence, the rulers cannot awaken, and the throne will remain powerless. Jason glanced at the glowing device on his arm. It had saved his life more than once, but the idea of using it to wake up alien monarchs felt absurd. And what happens if they don't want me as their heir? Kaluk, standing nearby, growled. They will have no choice. The gauntlet is proof of your legitimacy. Jason wasn't so sure. The Australis descended through the atmosphere, landing near the capital. A sprawling city of spires and domes, each structure glowing faintly in the dim light of the planet's distant sun. The air was heavy with silence, broken only by the hum of the ship's engines as they powered down. As the group stepped onto the surface, Jason felt a strange energy under his feet, as though the planet itself was alive and aware of their presence. The gauntlet pulsed in rhythm with the ground, guiding him toward the towering palace at the heart of the city. This place feels haunted, Jason said, his voice low. Ishara nodded. The memories of our people linger here. It is said the planet holds the consciousness of every Xendari who has ever lived. That's not creepy at all, Jason muttered. They reached the palace, its gates sealed with a barrier of light. As Jason approached, the gauntlet glowed brighter, and the barrier dissolved, granting them entry. Inside, the grandeur was overwhelming. Vast halls lined with crystalline statues, murals depicting the Empire's glory, and a sense of solemnity that made Jason feel small. At the end of the main hall stood a massive chamber, its walls covered in intricate carvings. In the center were rows of crystalline pods, each containing a Xendari ruler in perfect stasis. Their faces were serene, as though waiting for a moment that had finally arrived. "This is it," Ishara said. "The Council of Sovereigns." Jason hesitated. "And what exactly am I supposed to do?" "Place your hand on the central control panel," Ishara instructed, pointing to a pedestal covered in glowing symbols. "The gauntlet will do the rest." Jason approached the pedestal, his heart pounding. As his hand hovered over the panel, a voice echoed in his mind, deep, resonant, and unfamiliar. "Do you claim the throne, Jason Carter?" He froze. The voice wasn't coming from anyone in the room. It was inside him, as though the planet itself was speaking. I guess so. Do I have a choice?" "Claiming the throne binds you to the fate of the Xendari Empire," the voice continued. "Do you accept this burden?" Jason glanced at Ishara and Kaluk, both watching him intently. Taking a deep breath, he placed his hand on the panel. The gauntlet surged with energy, and the entire chamber came alive. The pods glowed as the rulers began to stir, their eyes flickering open one by one. Jason stepped back, overwhelmed as the room filled with the sound of ancient mechanisms and the soft murmurs of the awakening sovereigns. The rulers sat up slowly, their gazes falling on Jason. The tallest among them, a regal figure with glowing silver eyes, stepped forward. "Who dares disturb our slumber?" Jason swallowed hard. Hi. I'm Jason Carter, Earthling. Apparently, I'm your new heir." The rulers exchanged glances, their expressions unreadable. The silver-eyed one studied him closely. "The gauntlet binds you, but you are no Xendari. Explain yourself." Ishara stepped forward. He is the last descendant of the royal line, though his bloodline diverged on a distant world. The gauntlet chose him. The ruler's gaze turned icy. "And yet, he is untested. A throne cannot be claimed by mere blood. He must prove his worth." Jason's stomach sank. "What does that mean?" "It means," the ruler said, "that you will face the trials of ascension. Only then will we accept you as the rightful heir." As Jason prepared for the trials, he couldn't shake the feeling that this was a test he wasn't ready for. The rulers, though awake, seemed far from convinced of his worth. And deep within the palace, something darker stirred, something that had been waiting just as long as the sovereigns, but with far more sinister intentions. Jason clenched his fist, the gauntlet glowing faintly in response. If he was going to claim the throne, he'd have to survive whatever this ancient empire threw at him first. Great, he muttered to himself. No pressure. Galactic throne at stake. Jason Carter stood at the edge of the Hall of Trials, a vast chamber carved into the heart of the Xendari Palace. The air was heavy with energy, and the gauntlet on his arm pulsed faintly as if bracing itself for what was to come. Around him, the awakened rulers of the Xendari Council watched in silence, their glowing eyes filled with equal parts skepticism and expectation. "This is your final chance to prove yourself," said High Sovereign Calix, the most imposing of the rulers. His silver eyes bore into Jason. "The trials of ascension are not meant to test your strength alone. They will test your will, your wisdom, and your worthiness to lead an empire." Jason glanced at Ishara and Kalak, standing near the entrance. They offered no words of encouragement, only solemn nods. This was a test he had to face alone. "All right," Jason muttered under his breath. "Let's do this." Calix raised his hand, and the floor beneath Jason's feet began to shift. The room dissolved into a swirling vortex of light, and Jason felt himself falling. He landed with a jolt in the first trial. The environment around him was stark and cold, a barren desert under a blood-red sky. In the distance, a group of refugees huddled together, their faces etched with despair. As Jason approached, they cried out, pointing toward a massive sandstorm on the horizon. Within the storm, shapes moved. Enormous, predatory creatures. The voice of the gauntlet echoed in his mind. Trial 1. The burden of leadership. Protect the helpless. Jason's pulse quickened. He had no weapons, only the gauntlet, which hummed softly. As the storm approached, the creatures within it became clearer. Beasts with razor-sharp claws and glowing eyes, their growls echoing across the desert. "Great," Jason muttered. "How do I protect them without getting myself killed?" The refugees looked to him, their fear palpable. Jason clenched his fist, and the gauntlet reacted, creating a shimmering barrier of energy around the group. The creatures slammed against it, snarling and clawing, but the barrier held. For now, the strain was immense, and Jason felt his strength waning. "This isn't going to last forever," he muttered. Then he saw it, a massive crystal protruding from the ground nearby, glowing faintly. Instinct told him it was important. He turned to the group. "Stay here. Don't move." Jason sprinted toward the crystal, dodging the creatures that had broken through the barrier. As he touched it, the gauntlet surged with energy, creating a wave that drove the beasts back into the storm. The crystal shattered, and the storm dissipated, leaving the desert quiet once more. The refugees vanished, and the voice returned. "Trial 1 complete. You have shown the courage to protect those who cannot protect themselves." The scene shifted again. Jason now stood in a vast library, its shelves stretching endlessly in every direction. The air was thick with whispers, and the books seemed to move on their own, rearranging themselves constantly. Trial 2. The burden of wisdom. Solve the puzzle of the ages. A pedestal appeared before him, holding a cube similar to the one that had brought him here. Symbols danced across its surface, shifting and changing. Jason's head spun as he tried to make sense of it. "Okay," he said, rubbing his temples. "Think, Jason. Think." The whispers grew louder, and the room seemed to close in on him. Jason focused on the gauntlet, letting it guide his movements. He touched the cube, and the symbols began to align, forming a pattern that told a story, one of an empire's rise and fall, of decisions that shaped the galaxy. As the final piece clicked into place, the library dissolved. The voice spoke again. "Trial 2 complete. You have shown the wisdom to navigate complexity." The final trial was the most harrowing. Jason found himself on a battlefield, surrounded by chaos. Xendari soldiers fought desperately against the Venler forces, their screams and the clash of weapons filling the air. In the center of the field stood two figures, a Xendari general and a Venler commander, both wounded and struggling to stand. Trial 3. The burden of sacrifice. Choose who lives. Jason's stomach dropped. What? I can't. The voice was unyielding. A leader must make impossible decisions. Who will you save, and who will you let fall? The gauntlet pulsed, awaiting his choice. Jason's mind raced. If he saved the general, the Xendari forces might gain an advantage, but the Venler commander could hold vital information. If he saved the commander, it could lead to peace, but at what cost? Jason closed his eyes, his heart pounding. There has to be another way. The gauntlet glowed brighter, and Jason realized it wasn't about choosing one or the other. It was about finding a solution that transcended the choice. Drawing on the gauntlet's power, he unleashed a wave of energy that enveloped the battlefield, freezing the combatants in place. He approached both figures, placing a hand on each. No one has to die today. The battlefield faded, replaced by the Hall of Trials. Jason was back, standing before the council. Calix stepped forward, his expression unreadable. You have passed the trials, he said, but more importantly, you have shown us what kind of leader you will be. The throne is yours, Jason Carter. Jason felt the weight of the moment settle over him. He had survived the trials, but the real challenge was only beginning. The Venler fleet was still out there, and the galaxy's future rested on his shoulders. Let's hope I'm ready for this, Jason said, his voice steady despite the turmoil inside. Earthlings rise to power. The throne room of the Xendari Palace was unlike anything Jason Carter had ever seen. It wasn't just a seat of power, it was alive. Streams of light swirled around the room, pulsating in rhythm with the gauntlet on his arm. At the center, the throne itself hovered, a massive construct of gleaming metal and glowing crystals. It radiated an energy that made Jason's skin tingle. The Council of Sovereigns stood in a semicircle behind him, their expressions unreadable. Outside, the sky was dark, lit only by the distant flashes of battle as the Venler fleet descended on the planet. Jason turned to face the council, his heart pounding. You said the throne's power can turn the tide of this war, but no one's explained what it actually does. High Sovereign Calix stepped forward, his silver eyes gleaming. The throne channels the collective will of the Xendari Empire. It amplifies the gauntlet's power, allowing the ruler to protect the empire and its people. But such power comes at a cost. Jason raised an eyebrow. Let me guess. Another trial. A blood sacrifice. I'm getting used to those. Calix's expression remained stern. The cost is your freedom. Once you take the throne, you become its anchor. The Empire's survival will depend on your strength, but you will never leave this place again. Jason's breath caught. Wait, you're saying I'll be stuck here forever? Ishara stepped forward, her voice softer. The throne binds the ruler to the will of the Empire. It's why no one has sat upon it for centuries. The responsibility is immense, but the choice is yours. Jason's mind raced. He thought about Earth, the quiet life he'd been ripped away from, and the people he'd met on this journey, the ones who believed in him, even when he didn't believe in himself. A sudden jolt shook the palace, and the lights flickered. Kaluk, standing near the entrance, growled, "The Venler are breaching the planetary shield. We're running out of time." Jason clenched his fists. The gauntlet glowed, its energy surging in response to his emotions. If I don't do this, the Venler take everything, right? Calix nodded. The Empire will fall, and the galaxy will descend into chaos. Jason took a deep breath, his decision made. All right, let's do this. As Jason approached the throne, the room seemed to respond. The swirling lights intensified, and the energy became almost overwhelming. He placed his hand on the throne's armrest, and the gauntlet fused with it, locking him into place. A voice echoed in his mind, ancient and resonant. Jason Carter, do you accept the mantle of the Xendari throne, to wield its power and bear its burden for the good of the galaxy. Jason swallowed hard. I accept. The throne's energy surged, engulfing him in a blinding light. Jason felt his consciousness expand, connecting to the entire planet and beyond. He could see the Venler fleet in orbit, their ships descending toward the surface. He could feel the fear of the Xendari people and the desperation of the soldiers fighting to defend them. The gauntlet pulsed, channeling the throne's power. Jason focused, imagining a shield enveloping the planet. The energy responded, forming a massive barrier that stopped the Venler fleet in its tracks. The Venler ships fired their weapons, but the barrier held. Jason pushed harder, and beams of energy shot out from the planet, targeting the enemy fleet with pinpoint accuracy. One by one, the Venler ships exploded, their wreckage scattering into the void. Inside the throne room, the council watched in awe as the lights dimmed. Jason slumped back in the throne, his energy drained, but his resolve unbroken. The gauntlet's glow faded, signaling the end of the battle. Kalix stepped forward, bowing deeply. The Venler fleet is retreating. The Empire is safe. You have proven yourself worthy, Jason Carter. Jason managed a weak smile. Glad I could help. Now, can someone get me a drink? The room filled with laughter, a rare moment of levity among the Xendari. But Jason's mind was already racing with thoughts of what lay ahead. The Venler were defeated, but they wouldn't stay gone for long. The galaxy was vast, and its problems wouldn't disappear overnight. Ishara approached, her expression a mix of pride and sadness. You've saved us, Jason, but you've also sacrificed everything. Jason looked out at the stars beyond the throne room, his voice steady. I didn't ask for this, but if this is what it takes to protect people, then it's worth it. The lights of the throne room flickered, casting long shadows across the floor. Jason Carter, an ordinary Earthling turned galactic ruler, had claimed his place among the stars. But his journey was far from over. Somewhere in the galaxy, new challenges waited, and Jason was ready to face them. After all, he wasn't just a man anymore. He was the Xendari Emperor, and the galaxy was his to protect.